I still remember the exact second my heart stopped working properly. The parking lot lights were flickering above me, humming like something alive, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the car door. I had just gotten off a late shift, exhausted, already replaying the argument my teenage son and I had that morning. Then I saw him. He was sitting in the driver's seat, and he wasn't alone. His face was pale, not the normal I got caught doing something stupid pale, but the kind of pale that looks like someone has seen death up close. His lips trembled as he leaned toward the open window and whispered something that made my entire body freeze. "Promise you won't call the police." I laughed at first. It was a nervous, confused laugh, the kind you make when your brain refuses to accept what your eyes are seeing, because I thought maybe he'd crashed the car, maybe he'd been drinking, maybe it was some teenage mistake that we could fix together. But then I looked into the back seat, and I couldn't move. There was a man lying there, not moving, not breathing. And in that moment, everything inside me shattered into pieces. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my story of betrayal. And if you've ever trusted the wrong person, hit that subscribe button, because you are not alone. Here is how it happened. I was reading comments on my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized I wasn't the only one who had lived through a moment where a single choice split life into two timelines, before and after. Before that night, I was just a mother trying her best, a tired, ordinary woman working double shifts to keep the lights on and the fridge full. My son, Daniel, had always been a quiet kid, not perfect, but never dangerous. He loved video games, hated math, and used to leave sticky notes on the fridge that said things like, "Love you, Mom." That's why what happened next still doesn't feel real, because monsters don't usually look like your child. They don't wear the hoodie you bought them for Christmas. They don't call you Mom in a trembling voice while begging you to protect them. But that night, my son did. "Mom," he whispered, his eyes wide with terror. "Please, you have to promise." My mouth was dry. I couldn't even swallow. "What happened?" I finally managed to say. He shook his head violently. "Just promise first." That should have been my warning sign. That should have been the moment I stepped back, called for help, and refused to be pulled into whatever nightmare he had created. But when your child looks at you like they're drowning, instinct takes over. "I promise," I whispered. And the second those words left my mouth, everything got worse. Because Daniel's shoulders dropped in relief. Not guilt. Relief. That was the first time I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. He opened the car door slowly and stepped out. His hands were stained. Dark red. I stared at them, unable to breathe. "Mom," he said, voice shaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I forced myself to look into the back seat again. The man lying there was older, maybe mid-40s. His face was turned sideways, eyes half open, staring at nothing. There was blood on his shirt. So much blood. My knees nearly gave out. Is he dead?" I whispered. Daniel didn't answer, and his silence was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The parking lot felt suddenly too quiet, like the world itself had paused to watch what I would do next. My brain was screaming at me to run, to call someone, to undo the promise I had made seconds earlier. But another voice, the louder one, kept repeating, "That's your son. Protect him. Protect him. Protect him. Tell me everything," I said, gripping the car door to stay upright. Daniel looked around nervously, as if someone might be watching us. Then he said something that changed everything I thought I knew about him. "I didn't know he was your boss." My stomach dropped. The air left my lungs in a single violent rush, because suddenly the pieces started falling into place, and I realized this wasn't a random accident. This was connected to me, to my job, to the secret I had been hiding from my son for months. And as Daniel took a shaky breath and prepared to tell me what really happened, I had no idea that his next words would reveal a betrayal far worse than anything I could imagine.
For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "My boss?" I whispered, my voice barely a sound. "What do you mean, my boss?" Daniel swallowed hard, his eyes darting toward the back seat again, as if the man might suddenly sit up and prove this was all a nightmare. "I didn't know who he was," he said quickly. "I swear, Mom, I didn't know until until I saw his face under the parking lights. My heart began pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, because I already knew who was lying back there. I didn't need confirmation. The expensive watch, the tailored suit, the silver streak in his hair. That was Mr. Halpern, my manager. The man who controlled my job, my income, my future. And the man who just hours earlier had threatened to fire me if I didn't cooperate. A cold wave of dread washed over me. "Start talking," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady even as my hands trembled. "Now." Daniel ran both hands through his hair, pacing beside the car like a trapped animal. "I met him online," he said. The words hit me like a slap. "Online?" I repeated. He nodded, his eyes filling with shame. Not like that," he rushed to clarify. "He messaged me through a gaming forum. He said he wanted to sponsor my channel." I blinked in confusion. "Your gaming channel?" He nodded again. Daniel had always loved streaming, late nights whispering into his headset, laughing with friends across the country. I'd never taken it seriously. To me, it was just a hobby. But now my stomach twisted. "He said he worked with content creators," Daniel continued. "He said he could help me grow fast, get followers, even money." The pit in my chest deepened, because that sounded exactly like something Halpern would do. He loved power, loved control, loved finding people who needed something from him. "What happened tonight?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Daniel's breathing grew uneven. "He told me to meet him," he said. "He said he had a contract, real papers. He said we could sign everything in person." A terrible feeling crept into my bones. "Where?" I whispered, even though I already knew. Daniel gestured around us slowly. "Here." The parking lot suddenly felt suffocating, like it was closing in. "He said it had to be late," Daniel continued, "because he didn't want anyone to see him working outside the company." My throat tightened. Of course he had said that. Halpern was obsessed with secrecy. "Then what?" I asked. Daniel stopped pacing. His eyes met mine, and what I saw there made my heart fracture. Fear, not guilt. Fear. My stomach dropped. Weird how. Daniel's hands began to shake. He asked me personal questions about you, about our house, about when you were home alone. My entire body went cold. And then, Daniel said, his voice cracking, he locked the car doors. The world seemed to tilt. "What?" I breathed. He said the sponsorship wasn't free," Daniel continued, tears spilling down his face now. "He said if I wanted help, I had to do something for him first." I couldn't feel my hands anymore. "What did he want?" I asked, though dread already answered the question inside me. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said he wanted to teach me how to be useful to him." The meaning slammed into me like a truck. Rage exploded inside my chest so violently I thought I might pass out. That man, that disgusting manipulative. "He tried to grab me," Daniel said suddenly, his words tumbling out. "He pulled my arm. I panicked, Mom. I grabbed the first thing I saw." His eyes shifted toward the ground. The tire iron. My breath caught. "I didn't mean to hit him that hard," Daniel whispered. "I just wanted him to let go." Silence fell between us. Heavy. Crushing. "And he just collapsed," Daniel continued, his voice hollow. "He hit his head on the doorframe. I thought he was unconscious. I swear." My legs felt weak. "So, why is he still in the car?" I asked. Daniel's expression changed. That was the moment everything shifted. Because the fear in his eyes wasn't just from what had happened earlier. It was from something else. Something that came after. "I tried to call for help," he said, slowly. But then, his phone rang. A chill crawled up my spine. "And," I whispered. Daniel swallowed. "It was you calling." My heart stopped. The memory hit me instantly. I had called Halpern earlier that evening, furious after he cornered me at work and hinted he could make things difficult if I didn't agree to meet him privately. I had called to tell him no, to tell him I would report him, but he hadn't answered because he had been with my son, and Daniel had seen my name on the screen. I realized then who he was. Daniel whispered, "I saw your picture pop up when your call came through." He looked at me with shattered eyes, and I knew if I called the police, you would lose everything. My chest tightened painfully. So instead, Daniel continued, I dragged him into the back seat and drove here. I didn't know what to do. The weight of his words pressed down on me. My son hadn't been protecting himself. He had been protecting me. And that realization tore me apart inside. "Mom," he whispered, his voice small again, like when he was a child. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted him to stop. I reached out instinctively, grabbing his shoulders. "I know," I said, my voice trembling. "I know." But even as I said it, a horrifying thought began forming in my mind. Because something about this didn't add up. If it had only been one strike, if it had only been panic, then why? "Daniel," I said slowly, my voice barely steady. "How many times did you hit him?" His face went completely blank. And in that moment, I realized he hadn't told me everything. Because his lips parted, his eyes filled with fresh terror. And he whispered something that made my blood run cold. "Mom, he wasn't unconscious when I put him in the back seat." The night air suddenly felt freezing. Because that meant only one thing. When Daniel had driven away, my boss had still been alive.
My heart began to hammer so violently I could barely hear anything else. "What do you mean he wasn't unconscious?" I asked, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. Daniel's face crumpled. "He was breathing," he whispered. "Barely, but he was breathing." A cold dread spread through my chest. "Then what happened?" I pressed. Daniel stepped back from me like he was afraid of the answer himself. "I started driving," he said slowly. "I didn't know where to go. I just needed to get away from there." The parking lot lights flickered again above us, casting shadows across his face. "He kept making noises," Daniel continued, his voice unsteady, like he was trying to talk. My stomach twisted painfully. "And did he?" I asked quietly. Daniel hesitated. Then he nodded. The air seemed to leave my lungs all at once. "He said one thing," Daniel whispered. "What?" I breathed. Daniel's eyes locked onto mine, filled with a mixture of fear and something else, something darker. He said, "She knows." The words hit me like a physical blow. My mind raced. She knows. Knows what? 1,000 possibilities exploded through my thoughts,
each worse than the last. "Did he say anything else?" I asked. Daniel shook his head. "No," he whispered. "After that, he just stopped making noise." Silence fell heavy between us. The truth pressed down on me like an unbearable weight. If he had been alive when Daniel put him in the back seat, and now he wasn't, then something had happened during that drive. Something final. "Daniel," I said carefully, "did you check on him?" His breathing quickened. "I tried," he said. "I pulled over once. I went to the back seat. I shook him." He swallowed hard, but he didn't respond. My hands trembled as I gripped the car door. "Did you call an ambulance then?" I asked. Daniel looked at me with shattered eyes. "I couldn't," he whispered. "Why?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. "Because," he said, voice breaking, "when I went through his jacket to find his phone, I found something else." My heart sank. "What?" I asked. Daniel hesitated, and that hesitation terrified me more than anything else. "Photos," he finally whispered. My stomach dropped. "Photos of what?" His voice was barely audible now. "Of you." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "What?" I breathed. "They were on his phone," Daniel said. "Pictures of you at work, at the grocery store, even outside our house." My pulse roared in my ears. He had been watching me, following me. For how long? "And there was a folder," Daniel continued, his hands shaking uncontrollably now. "It had my name on it." I felt like I might collapse. "What was inside?" I whispered. Daniel's voice broke. "Screenshots of our messages," he said. "The ones from the gaming forum." The horror of it sank deep into my bones. This hadn't been random. This hadn't been a chance encounter. He had targeted Daniel because of me, because he knew we were vulnerable, because he knew we needed money, because he thought he could control us. Tears burned behind my eyes. "Oh my God," I whispered. Daniel nodded, his face pale. "That's when I realized," he said, "this wasn't just about me." The pieces clicked into place in a sickening pattern. Holborn hadn't just been manipulating my son. He had been planning something far worse, something that connected directly to me. "Mom," Daniel said suddenly, his voice urgent. "There was something else." My chest tightened. "What?" I asked. He hesitated. Then he said the words that made my entire body go cold. He had a voice recording. The world seemed to stop. "A recording of what?" I whispered. Daniel looked at me, his expression filled with dread. "Of you." My breath caught in my throat. "No," I whispered instinctively. "That's not possible." But deep inside, a terrible memory began surfacing. Months ago, a late night at the office, Holborn had asked me to stay behind to discuss my performance. He had poured drinks. I had refused. But I remembered now. He had set his phone on the desk, recording. My stomach churned violently. "What did it say?" I asked. Daniel swallowed hard. "It sounded like you arguing," he said. "You were telling him to stop threatening you." My heart pounded. "And then," Daniel continued, "he said something." My entire body tensed. "What?" I whispered. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said if you didn't cooperate, he would ruin both of us." Tears spilled down my cheeks. Because I remembered that moment now. I had been so scared, so desperate to keep my job, so afraid of what he could do. But I had refused him. And now he had come after my son instead. A wave of guilt crashed over me so hard I could barely stand. "This is my fault," I whispered. "No," Daniel said instantly, grabbing my arms. "Mom, no, he was the one who..." But I couldn't stop shaking, because deep down, a horrifying realization had begun to form. Holborn hadn't just been blackmailing me. He had been planning to trap us, to force us into silence. And now he was dead, which meant all the evidence of his crimes might still exist somewhere. And if someone found it, they wouldn't see victims. They would see a dead man in the back of our car. "Daniel," I said carefully, dread tightening my voice. "Where is his phone now?" Daniel's eyes widened, and his answer made my blood run cold. I don't have it." The world seemed to spin. "What do you mean you don't have it?" he said, his voice shaking. "I left it in the parking lot. When I saw your name calling, I panicked. I dropped it when I dragged him into the back seat." My heart slammed painfully against my ribs.
because that meant the phone, the photos, the recordings, everything that could prove the truth was lying somewhere out there, unprotected, and possibly already found. But that wasn't even the worst part, because at that exact moment, a distant sound cut through the night. Sirens, getting closer. Daniel's face went white. He whispered, and as red and blue lights began to flash at the far end of the parking lot, I realized something that made my entire body go numb. Someone had already called the police.
The sound of sirens sliced through the night like a blade. At first, they were distant, just a faint wail carried by the wind, but within seconds, they grew louder, sharper, unmistakable. Daniel's grip tightened painfully around my arm. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling, "they're coming here." My heart slammed violently in my chest. Every instinct screamed the same thing. This is it. This is the moment everything ends. The flashing red and blue lights appeared at the far end of the street, bouncing off windows and turning the empty parking lot into a nightmare of shifting colors. My mind raced. Had someone seen us? Had someone reported a disturbance earlier? Or worse, had someone already found Halpern's phone? "Listen to me," I said urgently, forcing myself into action. "We need to think." Daniel shook his head frantically. "There's nothing to think about," he said. "They're going to find him." His eyes flicked toward the back seat, toward the still, unmoving shape lying there. A crushing wave of reality hit me. Yes, they would find him. And when they did, it would look simple. A dead man, a terrified teenage boy, a mother standing beside a car. No context, no truth, just evidence. And evidence never cared about intentions. "Daniel," I said, grabbing his face so he had no choice but to look at me, "did anyone see you hit him?" He swallowed hard. "No," he whispered. "It was just us." "Did anyone see you dragging him into the back seat?" He hesitated. I don't think so." The uncertainty in his voice made my stomach twist, because "I don't think so" wasn't the same as no, and right now, every detail mattered. "Did you touch anything else?" I pressed. "Door handles? His phone? Anything?" Daniel nodded slowly, panic rising in his eyes. "Yes," he said, "I touched everything." My pulse roared in my ears, which meant his fingerprints would be everywhere. On the tire iron, on the car, on Halpern. The truth wouldn't look like self-defense. It would look like murder. And suddenly, another horrifying realization struck me. "Daniel," I whispered, dread creeping into my voice. "The car." He froze. "You drove here," I continued. "There are cameras everywhere in this area." His face went pale. Security cameras, traffic cameras, parking lot cameras, all of them silently recording every second of our nightmare. The sirens were getting closer now, so close I could hear the engines. "We're out of time," Daniel whispered. I looked at him, really looked. He was still just a boy, a terrified, shaking boy who had tried to defend himself against a predator. A boy who had made one terrible, desperate mistake. And in that moment, something inside me made a decision that would change everything. "Listen to me," I said quietly. Daniel's eyes searched mine, desperate. "What?" he asked. "You are not saying anything," I told him firmly. "Not a single word. Do you understand?" He blinked in confusion. "But, no," I cut in, gripping his shoulders. "You don't explain. You don't defend yourself. You don't try to fix anything." His voice cracked. "Then what do I do?" I held his gaze. "You let me handle it." His eyes widened in shock. "Mom, what are you saying?" The flashing lights were spilling into the parking lot now, washing over us in pulses of red and blue. I took a deep breath, and I said the words that would bind my fate to his forever. "I'm going to tell them I did it." Daniel recoiled as if I had struck him. "No," he said instantly, shaking his head. "No, you can't." "Yes, I can," I said quietly. Tears filled his eyes. "Mom, that's insane. You didn't do anything." "Thought I can survive prison," I whispered. His face crumbled. "You can't," he said. "You wouldn't survive that." "I would," I insisted, though fear twisted inside me. "Because you would still be out here, living, having a future." He stared at me, horrified. "I can't let you do that," he whispered. "You don't have a choice," I said gently. His voice broke. "You're my mom." "And you're my son," I replied, my voice shaking. "That means your life matters more than mine." Tears streamed down his face. "No," he whispered. "That's not how it works."
But I already knew my decision. I had known it the second I saw him sitting in that driver's seat. Because motherhood changes you in ways nothing else can. It rewires your instincts. It makes you capable of sacrifices you never imagined. Even this one. Even sacrificing your own freedom. The siren stopped. Car doors slammed. Voices echoed across the lot. "They're here," Daniel whispered. My heart pounded. "Remember," I told him softly, "you say nothing." His lips trembled. "Mom, please." But I stepped away from him, toward the approaching officers, toward the flashing lights, toward the point of no return. I raised my hands slowly as they shouted commands. And just before they reached us, Daniel screamed something that shattered everything. "Wait." I turned, panic surging through me. His face was streaked with tears, and his voice shook as he shouted the words that would change everything again. It wasn't her. The officers froze. So did I. Because Daniel's next sentence was something I never saw coming. I wasn't the one who killed him. The world seemed to stop. My heart skipped violently. What did he just say? He wasn't the one who killed him. Then who? My blood ran cold. Because suddenly a terrifying possibility exploded in my mind. If Daniel hadn't killed Halburn, then someone else had. And that meant whoever that was could still be out there, watching.
For a moment, nobody moved. The officers froze mid-step, their flashlights cutting sharp beams through the darkness. The red and blue lights pulsed across Daniel's tear-streaked face, making him look even younger, even more fragile. My own heart slammed so hard it hurt, because his words echoed inside my skull. I wasn't the one who killed him. A cold, suffocating silence filled the parking lot. One of the officers stepped forward slowly, his voice calm but firm. "Son," he said, "what do you mean by that?" Daniel's breathing was ragged, uneven. He looked at me, and the fear in his eyes told me he hadn't planned to say this. It had burst out of him, like a truth too heavy to hold anymore. "I hit him," Daniel whispered. "I told you that. But he was still alive when I left." The officer exchanged a quick glance with his partner. "And what happened after you left?" the officer asked. Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know," he said. "I drove. I stopped once. He wasn't moving anymore. I thought he died from the hit." The officer's flashlight shifted toward the back seat. "Ma'am," he said to me gently, "step away from the vehicle." My legs felt weak, but I obeyed. The officer approached the car cautiously, shining his light inside. And then I saw it. The exact moment his expression changed. His jaw tightened. His posture stiffened. He stepped back and spoke into his radio in a low voice. "We have a confirmed fatality." The words felt like a physical blow. Fatality. The final confirmation. But even then, my mind kept circling Daniel's statement. He wasn't the one who killed him. If that was true, then what really happened in that car? The second officer turned back toward Daniel. "You said he was alive when you drove. Did anyone else approach you? Did you stop anywhere else?" Daniel hesitated, and that hesitation sent a sharp wave of dread through me. "Daniel," I whispered urgently, "tell them everything." He looked at me, then back toward the officer. His lips trembled. I stopped at a gas station," he admitted. My stomach dropped. "When?" the officer asked. "About 15 minutes after I left the first parking lot," Daniel said. "I needed to calm down. I needed to think." The officer nodded. "Did anyone speak to you there?" Daniel closed his eyes briefly, as if trying to force himself to remember. "Yes," he whispered. "My pulse spiked." "Who?" the officer asked. Daniel's voice shook. "A woman." The word hung heavy in the air. My mind immediately started racing. A woman? Who?
Did you know her? The officer asked. Daniel shook his head. No, he said. I had never seen her before. Describe her. Daniel swallowed. She was maybe in her late 30s. Dark hair. She looked angry. A chill crawled up my spine. What did she want? The officer pressed. Daniel's face tightened. She knocked on my window, he said. She asked if I was okay. The scene played vividly in my mind now. A shaken teenage boy sitting in a car late at night, clearly distressed. Anyone might have approached. But Daniel's next words made my blood run cold. I told her I was fine, he said, but she kept staring at the back seat. My breath caught. She asked who was back there, the officer continued. The officer leaned slightly forward. And what did you say? Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. I said it was my dad. A painful knot formed in my chest. He had been trying to protect himself, trying to hide the truth. And then what? The officer asked. Daniel's hands began to shake again. She didn't believe me, he whispered. My heart pounded. How do you know? The officer asked. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the car. Because she opened the back door. The words slammed into me like thunder. What? I breathed. The officer's expression hardened. She opened the door, he repeated. Daniel nodded slowly. She just pulled it open, like she had every right to. My pulse roared in my ears. And then what happened? The officer asked. Daniel's face turned pale. She looked at him, he whispered. The silence in the parking lot deepened. And then she said something, Daniel continued. What did she say? The officer asked quietly. Daniel's voice cracked. She said, finally. The words sent ice through my veins. Finally. Not shock, not fear. Relief. Like she had been waiting for this moment. Then what? The officer asked. Daniel's breathing quickened. She leaned inside, he said. I thought she was checking if he was alive. His eyes filled with horror. But she wasn't. My heart stopped. What was she doing? I whispered. Daniel's voice shook roundly. She was pressing something against his neck. The world seemed to tilt. What? The officer asked sharply. Daniel's lips trembled. It looked like a pen, he said, but it wasn't writing. A cold, sickening realization formed instantly. She stabbed him, Daniel whispered. The parking lot fell into stunned silence. My mind struggled to process the words. Not an accident. Not just self-defense. Someone had deliberately finished what Daniel had started. Did you try to stop her? The officer asked. Daniel shook his head frantically. I was frozen, he said. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. And what did she do after that? Daniel swallowed hard. She looked at me, and she smiled. A chill ran down my spine. Then she said something, Daniel continued. My heart pounded. What? The officer asked. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. She said, tell your mother she should have listened. The words hit me like a gunshot. My knees nearly gave out. Because suddenly, everything clicked. This woman wasn't random. She wasn't a stranger. She knew me. She knew Halburn. And she had been watching us too. But the most terrifying realization came next. If she had known who Daniel was, then she had known exactly what she was doing. This hadn't been a coincidence. It had been revenge. And as the officer stared at me with new intensity, I realized something that made my blood run ice cold. They were no longer looking at Daniel as the main suspect. They were looking at me. Because whoever that woman was, she had made one thing painfully clear. This was personal.
The flashing lights of the patrol cars danced across the parking lot, turning every shadow into a threat. My son was shaking beside me, and I could feel the tension in his body as if it had seeped into my own bones. The officers' radios crackled, the voices clipped and urgent, but all I could hear was Daniel's trembling breaths and the memory of that woman's words. Tell your mother she should have listened. I felt my stomach knot tightly. Every instinct screamed that we were already too deep, that stepping one more inch into this nightmare might bury us completely. The lead officer, a tall man with a sharp jaw and wary eyes, approached me slowly. His flashlight cut across my face, highlighting the tears streaking down my cheeks. He studied me in silence for what felt like forever, then spoke. Ma'am, we need the truth, he said. Right now. Did you have anything to do with his death? I could feel Daniel tense beside me. He looked as if he were ready to leap forward, to defend me, to scream that I had nothing to do with it. But I shook my head slightly, giving him the only signal I could. Stay silent. I didn't, I said quietly, my voice trembling but firm. My son, he was involved, but I didn't touch him. The officer narrowed his eyes. Your son says he hit him, but someone else finished it off. I nodded, my throat dry. Yes, there was a woman. She stabbed him. The officers exchanged a look, their expressions unreadable. One of them radioed back, asking if there were any witnesses, any surveillance cameras in the area. My stomach churned. Daniel's story was horrifying, but if there was proof, if anyone had seen that woman, she could be traced. The lead officer looked at Daniel now, crouching slightly to meet his gaze. Son, he said gently, we need you to tell us everything you saw. Every detail counts. Daniel swallowed hard and began. His voice trembled, almost inaudible at first, but he forced himself forward. I hit him, he began, his voice cracking. I didn't mean to kill him. I panicked. I dragged him into the back seat. I drove, and then at the gas station, she came. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was, and she looked into the back seat. The officer leaned in, listening closely, and I felt Daniel's hands clutch mine. He was terrified, exhausted, still shaking from the memory. She stabbed him, he said finally. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen. She smiled and said, tell your mother she should have listened. And then she left. The world seemed to collapse inside me. I thought I was prepared to face the truth, that my son had Halpern, that he had acted out of fear. But this was something else entirely. Someone had targeted us. Someone had waited. And now the police would start piecing it together, looking at us, looking at me, wondering what I had done. I glanced at Daniel. His face was pale, the tears streaking down his cheeks. It wasn't your fault, Mom, he whispered. It wasn't my fault either. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But deep down, I knew the world would never see it that way. To them, it was simple. A dead man, a terrified boy, and a mother caught in the middle. The officer spoke again, his voice sharp. Ma'am, you need to tell us about your relationship with Halpern. Did he threaten you? Did he try to control your son? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to speak. He was dangerous. He tried to manipulate us. He targeted my son because of me. He was obsessed with control. The officer nodded slowly, taking notes. But in that moment, I realized something terrifying. No one would believe the full story until the woman was caught, until someone traced her movements, until the truth could be proven. And that truth might never come. A sudden rustle from the nearby bushes made me jump. Daniel froze beside me, and my pulse spiked. The flashing lights made shadows leap across the pavement. For a moment, I thought the woman had returned. She's watching, I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. Daniel clutched my hand tightly. Mom, what do we do? I swallowed hard. We survive, I whispered. We survive long enough for the truth to come out, and we stay together. The officers radioed again, asking about possible evidence. My stomach churned. Halpern's phone, the recordings, the photos. Everything was gone, either destroyed or left behind. Without them, it would be our word against reality. And that's when it hit me. We were alone. The police could help, but they couldn't undo what had happened. They couldn't erase the fear in Daniel's eyes, the guilt twisting inside him. And they couldn't protect us from the woman who had orchestrated this. Mom, Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. Then we'll face her, together. His eyes widened. Together. I nodded. You're my son. That means nothing in this world can separate us. A distant siren wailed again, and I realized it was not just the police. It was the sound of our lives spinning out of control. Because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The woman had struck first, but we weren't out of the game yet. We had to survive. We had to protect each other. And we had to uncover the truth before it was too late. I looked at Daniel, saw the fear in his eyes, the trembling hands, the raw vulnerability, and I made a promise, silent, unspoken, but as strong as steel. I will protect him, no matter what it takes. The lead officer finally spoke again, pulling me out of my thoughts. We need to take both of you in for questioning. We'll keep you safe, but we need every detail, every moment you remember. Daniel swallowed hard, clutching my hand. Mom, I know. And as we walked toward the patrol car, the flashing lights reflected in the puddles on the asphalt, I knew one thing for certain. This nightmare was far from over. Somewhere out there, the woman was still watching, still waiting, and she wasn't done.
My son and I were about to enter a world of secrets, lies, and vengeance. A world where one wrong move could destroy everything. And as the doors of the patrol car closed behind us, I realized the real fight had only just begun.
The metal doors of the patrol car slammed shut behind us, trapping Daniel and me in a cocoon of harsh fluorescent light, the smell of leather and antiseptic, and the deafening hum of sirens outside. My hands trembled uncontrollably, and I could see the fear mirrored in my son's wide eyes. The silence inside the car was almost unbearable, broken only by the occasional crackle from the radio and the faint rustling of Daniel's jacket as he fidgeted nervously. I gripped his hand tightly, feeling his pulse hammering against mine. "Daniel," I whispered, "look at me." He blinked rapidly, trying to calm himself. "No matter what happens, we survive. Together. We hold on to each other. That's the only way we make it through this." He nodded, but his lips quivered. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on us. The dead man in the parking lot, the woman who had finished him off, the missing phone with the damning evidence, and worst of all, the truth we didn't even know yet, lurking somewhere in the shadows. The patrol car came to a sudden stop, jolting us forward. Outside, the flashing lights bounced off the concrete walls of the nearby precinct. Officers moved quickly, shadows in the night, voices sharp and clipped. The car doors opened, and we were led into a sterile interrogation room. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly overhead, casting pale reflections across the tiled floor. "Sit," an officer commanded. Daniel sank into the chair beside me, knees trembling, hands pressed tightly to his thighs. I sat as well, trying to appear calm despite the chaos in my chest. The lead detective, a woman with steel gray hair and eyes sharp as knives, entered and closed the door behind her. She placed a manila folder on the table, the sharp scent of paper and ink filling the air. "Mrs. Thompson," she began, her voice calm but firm, "your son has given us a statement. We understand that this is traumatic and we want to help, but we need the truth, every detail." I nodded slowly. "I understand," I said, my throat tight. "I'll tell you everything I know." She gave me a measured look and then turned her attention to Daniel. "Son," she said, "I need you to focus. Tell us everything you saw from the moment you got into the car with Mr. Halpern." Daniel swallowed hard. His voice trembled, but he began. I met him at the parking lot," he said. "He was supposed to discuss a sponsorship. He said it was important, and I didn't know what to do. He got aggressive. He grabbed me. I hit him with a tire iron. I didn't know he'd get hurt like that." The detective nodded, her expression unreadable. "Then what happened?" I dragged him into the back seat," Daniel said, shivering. "I was trying to protect myself and my mom. I drove away, trying to think of what to do. He was still alive for a while, I think. And then a woman, she came to a gas station. She looked into the back seat, and then she stabbed him." I felt a chill run down my spine. Daniel's words matched my worst fears. That woman had planned this. She knew exactly how to finish what Halpern had started. The detective leaned forward. "Do you remember anything about her? Her appearance? Anything at all?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Dark hair, maybe late 30s, angry. She smiled and said something about me telling my mom she should have listened." The room fell silent for a moment. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to stop. I could feel Daniel's hand trembling in mine, and I squeezed it gently to ground him. She knew us," I said quietly, my throat tight. "She knew me, and she targeted my son." The detective wrote something in her folder, then looked up sharply. "Do you have any idea who she could be?" I hesitated, fear twisting my chest. I don't know, but she's personal. This wasn't random. She knew Halpern. She knew what he was doing, and she wanted revenge or control." Daniel shivered beside me. "Mom, what if she comes after us next?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm for him. "Then we face her," I whispered. "Together." The detective nodded slowly. "We're going to investigate, but we need you both to stay here. No one leaves until we know we're safe." As she left the room, the weight of everything settled over me. The dead man, the woman, the missing evidence, all of it pressed down like a storm cloud ready to break. And yet, beneath the terror, I felt a spark of determination. I couldn't let this destroy my son. I wouldn't. Hours seemed to pass in a blur. The officers returned periodically, asking questions, taking notes, checking security footage from the parking lot and surrounding areas.
But every answer seemed to raise more questions. There was no sign of the woman, no sign of the phone, and the footage only showed shadows and fleeting movements, not the person who had delivered the fatal strike. Daniel and I sat together, shoulders touching, hands clasped. Every creak of the building, every footstep in the hall made our hearts leap. And then, just as the first hints of dawn touched the windows, a knock at the door startled us. The detective entered, holding a folder. Her expression was sharp. "We may have a lead," she said. She opened the folder slowly, revealing grainy surveillance photos. "This woman, she's been caught on camera before, in connection with someone named Halburn." My stomach tightened. "Do you know her identity?" I whispered. The detective nodded. "Yes, her name is Victoria Hale. She worked with him, or maybe against him. We're not sure yet. But she's dangerous, and she's been known to manipulate and harm those who get in her way." Daniel swallowed hard. She could come back?" "Yes," the detective said bluntly. "And if she does, we need to be ready." I pulled Daniel closer. "We'll be ready," I whispered. "We'll survive." The rest of the day passed in a haze of questioning, paperwork, and waiting. Every sound in the precinct felt magnified. The tapping of keyboards, the rustle of paper, the distant hum of traffic outside. Daniel sat beside me, pale and exhausted, but determined. And I realized that through all the fear and chaos, one thing had become painfully clear. We were still together, and that meant we still had a chance. But just as I allowed myself a moment to breathe, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, and my blood ran cold. A single text message flashed on the screen. "You should have listened. I'm closer than you think." I dropped the phone. Daniel gasped beside me. The detective glanced at us sharply. "What is it?" I shook my head, unable to speak. The words on the screen were enough. Victoria Hale had found us. She was watching, and nothing would ever be the same again. I looked at Daniel. His face mirrored my own fear, but also his trust. And I realized something terrifying, and yet empowering. We were about to face the most dangerous moments of our lives. Together. And in that moment, I knew the nightmare was far from over. But I also knew that we had to fight, no matter what it took.
The message from Victoria Hale burned into my mind like fire. "You should have listened. I'm closer than you think." The precinct felt smaller, colder, and somehow more dangerous than it had ever seemed before. The fluorescent lights flickered above us, harsh and unforgiving, as if they were illuminating not just the room, but the edges of a trap we had stumbled into. I could feel Daniel trembling beside me, his small hand clutching mine so tightly that my fingers ached. We had survived the night. We had survived the police questioning. But that message made it abundantly clear. Survival was no longer about the past. It was about what awaited us next. "Mom, what do we do?" Daniel whispered, his voice small and raw. I looked at him, and I swallowed the fear clawing at my throat. "We fight," I said. "Not with violence, not yet, but with strategy, with courage, and with the truth. No matter how terrifying it is, we have to face it." The detective returned, her expression unreadable. "We've traced the number," she said quietly. "It's unregistered, encrypted. Whoever sent it is skilled, and they don't want to be found. But," she hesitated, glancing between Daniel and me, "we're going to do everything we can to track her." I nodded, even though inside I felt a tightening panic. "Thank you," I whispered. "Please keep us safe." She gave a small, grim nod and left the room again, leaving us alone with the echoing hum of the precinct. Daniel and I sat together in silence, neither of us moving. The reality of what had happened and what could still happen pressed down on us like a tidal wave. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. Every creak of the building, every distant footstep made my pulse spike. Daniel leaned against me, exhausted and shaking, but unwilling to sleep. Finally, I spoke, my voice quiet but firm. "Daniel, listen to me. You are not to blame for any of this. Not for what happened with Halburn, not for what happened with Victoria, not for anything. Do you understand?" He nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. I wanted to protect you," he whispered. "And you did," I said, pressing my forehead to his. "You protected me, and I will protect you. We're going to survive this, together." That night, as we were moved to a secure location under police supervision, I thought about how fragile life could be, how quickly trust could turn into terror. Halburn had been a predator, Victoria had been a shadow waiting for the right moment, and my son had been thrust into a situation no child should ever face. But I also realized something essential. The human heart is capable of extraordinary courage. My son had acted out of instinct, fear, and love, and I had acted out of instinct, fear, and love. Even in the darkest moments, even when everything seemed hopeless, love had guided us. Over the next few days, the police worked tirelessly. Surveillance footage, witness statements, and digital traces slowly began to form a web of evidence against Victoria. She had been tracking Halburn long before the night of the attack. She had her own agenda, her own vendetta, and she had chosen us as pawns in her game. But with every piece of evidence, with every statement we gave, the truth became stronger. I watched Daniel slowly regain a bit of his composure. He still shook when he thought about that night, but he was beginning to understand something crucial. Fear doesn't define you. Choices do. Courage does. Love does. And he had all three in abundance. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in streaks of gold and crimson, the detective came to speak with us. She had a rare, faint smile on her face. "We have enough to issue an arrest warrant," she said. "Victoria Hale is on the run, but this time she won't escape justice." I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Daniel looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time in days. "That doesn't change what happened," he said softly. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. But it changes what's coming next. Justice will be served, and we'll finally be free of this shadow." In that moment, I understood the true lesson of that night. Life could change in an instant. One decision, one moment of panic, one act of love or fear could alter everything. But no matter how terrifying the darkness, no matter how cunning the predators in the world, courage and love could light the path forward. Daniel and I returned home under police guidance. The house felt impossibly quiet after the chaos of the past week. Every corner, every shadow, seemed to hold a memory of the night that had almost destroyed us. But it also held a lesson. We had survived. We had stayed together. And nothing could take that away. I sat with Daniel at the kitchen table, holding his hands in mine. "You know," I said quietly, "sometimes the people who seem the safest, the ones we trust, can turn into threats. And sometimes the ones we think are powerless can be our greatest strength." He nodded slowly, understanding in his young eyes. "I just want to forget it ever happened," I whispered. "I know," I whispered. "But forgetting doesn't erase what we learned, and what we learned is how strong we are together." Weeks passed. The police continued their investigation, and pieces of Victoria's past emerged, a twisted path of manipulation, obsession, and violence. But the bond between Daniel and me grew stronger. We shared our fears openly now, and we no longer felt powerless. Every morning, every meal, every quiet evening together was a small victory, a reminder that life, even after terror, could still hold moments of peace. Eventually, the court proceedings began. Daniel's testimony was crucial. He spoke honestly, with courage, recounting the terrifying night and the actions of both Halburn and Victoria. The officers and detectives ensured he felt safe, supported. And in the courtroom, as I listened to him, I felt an overwhelming pride. My son had faced fear that no child should ever endure, and he had survived. Victoria Hale was eventually apprehended, her plans unraveled. She faced justice for her actions. Halburn's death was ruled manslaughter, with the courts recognizing Daniel's lack of intent and the extraordinary circumstances surrounding the events. It wasn't perfect justice. Nothing about that night could ever be perfect. But it was closure. Sitting with Daniel afterward, holding him close, I realized the ultimate truth. Life doesn't always give us clear paths. Sometimes it hands us darkness and forces us to navigate it with nothing but love, instinct, and courage. And sometimes surviving the darkness is its own kind of victory. "Mom, do you think we'll ever be normal again?" I kissed the top of his head and whispered, "Normal isn't the point. Life isn't about normal. It's about surviving, learning, and growing stronger. And we did that, together." He smiled faintly, tired but relieved. And in that moment, I understood that the nightmares of the past would never fully disappear, but they would no longer control us. We had faced betrayal, danger, and fear, and we had emerged stronger. As the sun rose over our city, spilling golden light across our quiet street, I realized something profound.
The world could be cruel, but it could also be beautiful. Trust could be broken, but love could rebuild it. Fear could be overwhelming, but courage could conquer it. And the most important lesson of all, no matter how dark the night, there was always a dawn. Daniel and I stood side by side, facing the rising sun, ready for whatever came next. We had survived the unthinkable. We had confronted betrayal. We had found strength in each other. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to hope. Because the night had been terrifying, the events had been unimaginable, but we had made it through. And that made every moment of our lives from now on a testament to survival, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. The past would always be with us, etched into our hearts, but it no longer had power over our future. We were alive, we were together, and we were free.